Hey everybody, welcome to installment number 3 of our art history lecture series. Our letter T artist is going to be Wayne Thiebaud, and I thought I'd just quick kind of scroll through some examples of some of his paintings. He's best known for painting desserts, ice cream cones, cakes, pies, gumball machines. He does do a few portraits and landscapes. Very colorful pop artist. I just wanted to give you a little taste of what his work looked like before we got to the PowerPoint. So here we go. Wayne Thiebaud. You do not say the D, although sometimes I accidentally do. He was born in Arizona in 1920. He's actually 99 years old this year, and will be turning 100 and still paints, so that's really exciting. But his family did move to Long Beach, California when he was just a baby. And it just looks like it was kind of a fun, sunshiny place to grow up. So in high school, he was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. He was involved in the theater department, and one thing that he kind of cites as an inspiration to him was the dramatic effects that stage lighting had on objects. And so almost all of his paintings, you see these kind of distinct shadows and highlights and things like that. Just one of his signature styles. Okay, so another thing that you see in a lot of his paintings are something called like these rainbow halos or rainbow edges, and if you were to zoom into these pictures, you'd see that there's little kind of almost shadows of different colors around, almost every part of the picture. And this is really an effect that is just kind of accidental, but really exists in every single one of his paintings. And the reason that effect exists is because he does a lighter version of the painting. Usually starts with like a light blue, light yellow, something like that, and then gradually adds more and more layers of color, and they get darker and darker. And sometimes those older layers kind of show through, and so that's how that halo effect gets achieved. Now, when he was in high school, he also played football, and unfortunately, he broke his back while playing football. And so while he was recuperating and bedridden, he used drawing as kind of form of entertainment to keep him occupied while he was recovering. And still to this day, drawing is a big kind of aspect of his painting. So almost every painting that we find, there's a original pencil sketch that he did in advance to sort of plan for it. And so a lot of nice examples of those. So as a teenager, he had a job at a cafe. It was called Mile High and Red Hot. The Mile High was a sundae, and the Red Hot was a hot dog that they served. And anyway, I've heard that he's been able to draw a lot of these images from his imagination just because he spent so much time serving this kind of food. Although I think he certainly did a lot of observation drawing as well. Just the detail is too great for me to think that he did this all from his imagination. Anyway, one kind of story that he tells a lot is that he, kind of enjoyed working at this place, but unfortunately his boss asked him to add flour to the beef mixture to kind of stretch it and make it last farther, and he felt like that was cheating the customers, and so he actually quit working there for that reason. But he was able to follow up with finding an incredibly great job for a young person in his lifetime. He got a job apprenticing for Walt Disney Studios, and this was, kind of at the height of the Great Depression, and he was getting paid $14 a week, which was really great pay for a person his age back in that time. And he got to do what they called the in-between scenes, of the major feature films and things like that. But he got to do images of Goofy and Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket, lots of characters that people would have been familiar with in that time. So he continued to work as a cartoonist, not just for Disney, but kind of as a commercial illustrator for magazines and advertisements drawn anywhere. And he did this both in California and in New York City for basically the next 10 to 12 years of his career. Now, when World War II started, he was drafted into the Air Force, but immediately they found out that he was this kind of talented artist, and they used him to make cartoons for the newspaper, and also to help with making motion pictures. And he was assigned to the first motion picture unit, where they made kind of propaganda films and things like that. And basically, his artistic talents kind of kept him off the front lines of combat. So there's kind of a fun fact there. So when World War II ended, Thiebaud came back to California and worked on both his 4-year bachelor's degree and 2 years master's degree at Sacramento State College. And then after that, he became an art professor. And he did this at the University of California. He started there in 1960 and continued to teach there up until 1991. So it's a 31-year career as an art professor. It's a pretty long time. He did have a reputation for being an extremely difficult professor there. You can see that he his students said that lots of times that he was the hardest professor they ever had. He encouraged them to draw from observation. He always wanted them to kind of figure out what the light source was, how, where the shadows were, how the light source, created highlights and things like that. And he lots of times had his students draw the same object over and over again until they really got great at drawing it. Several of his students said that he would have them draw the same object for a month straight. But you can see that he got a lot of artistic virtue just from those kind of practices. And that would also eventually translate into his painting style. And even though it might have been a very simple, small object, he was, rendered, extreme detail. Okay, so now once he became a professor, he did decide to take a 1-year kind of leave of absence to go to New York and just kind of explore the art scene out there. So the leave of absence is kind of like you're not giving up your job, you're just taking a year off. You don't get paid for it, but you do get to come back and have your job after that year ends. And so he went to New York City and kind of just wanted to learn about the art scene there. And he did make friends with a number of kind of influential artists. The first one was Willem de Kooning. We actually talked about his wife, Elaine de Kooning, in the JFK portrait in our Amy Sherald lecture. Willem de Kooning was known for these very abstract, almost completely non-objective images. They almost look like kind of scribble-scrabble. These are a little bit more realistic versions of some of his pieces, but he was an influential artist of the era. Jasper Johns kind of reminds me of Robert Indiana, our artist that used a lot of text and symbols. He also used a lot of repetition. And then Robert Rauschenberg, he was a mixed media artist, which was kind of a new thing in the time, but he's printmaking along with his own drawings and paintings and collage and put them together to create one image. This image in the center is made from floppy disks, which was kind of our computer chip a long time ago. Anyway, these were all important people for him to get connected with in his lifetime. So in New York, it's where he kind of found his niche, where he started painting images of desserts. And lots of times he kind of did them sort of assembly line style, just the way we would see food displayed in glass cases and storefronts and things like that. Now, one thing he would always do is kind of isolate his subject matter. So you never saw whatever he was painting, in front of a busy background or people in motion or anything like that. He would kind of get these objects all by themselves, have kind of dramatic lighting on them, and just kind of focus on those still lifes. And again, the shadows are kind of distinct. They're bright colors, blues, violets, greens, things like that, and they have those little rainbow halos around them. Okay, now Thiebaud was most famous for drawing desserts and food and things like that, but that wasn't the only thing that he did. He did a lot of kind of commercial art. So that came from early in his career when he was drawing advertisements for magazines and things like that. And he kind of carried that into his own personal interest. And so you kind of see makeup and clothing and things like that in some of his work. A lot of still lifes, but he also did landscapes. And one thing in particular that he liked to do is he kind of liked to do some of those, kind of farm scenes where the land is kind of separated and kind of tilled in different ways for different crops and sort of things like that. But he was also very much inspired by the landscape of San Francisco. San Francisco is a very hilly area, and he always was kind of fascinated with these four-way stops where not only were roads going in 4 different directions, but they're almost going at different angles. And sometimes he would exaggerate that kind of cliff or drop-off feeling, almost to the point where he's got roads drawn almost as if they're vertical, like the skyscrapers right next to him. And that was like another kind of signature style that he did. And then again, just another landscape that I really love of his, and just want to kind of point out how the shadows are just as much featured as the actual buildings themselves. And then finally, he was also known for doing portraits. And again, he would kind of isolate these images all by themselves, and he frequently would have people that he knew pose for him. His wife posed for him all the time, and sometimes his sons and friends. But this right here is a picture of his wife. I believe this is definitely his wife, and she's also featured there. That could also be her. So she was kind of one of his favorite people to paint. And then these are some images that he did at the beach, also of his family. So he got two of his first solo shows, both one in San Francisco and then another in New York City. And again, this is usually a mark of success for an artist, for any gallery to kind of clear out a room or space and just only present artwork by one artist. But unfortunately, both of his first two solo exhibits received very little recognition. They didn't sell. They didn't get great ratings in the newspaper. So people were kind of interested in showing his work, but it just wasn't the big success that they had hoped. But one thing that did kind of happen to him that was sort of fortunate when he was in New York is that he kind of learned a new business model for art. So, and this is called a co-op, and co-op is just short for the word cooperative. And it's a business model where a bunch of artists might come together and they rent out a large space together. They maybe split the cost somehow, and different artists will rent out different booths or kind of areas within a building. And then no one actually gets paid or works there, but maybe they work there, kind of volunteer 2 days out of the week, and then they just receive the profits from whatever they've sold. And this was a pretty successful model in New York City, and it wasn't really being done anywhere else. And he decided to kind of copy this and bring this business model out to California. And this is really perfect for him, who is an art professor, a way for him to kind of sell his art on the side without it being too time consuming. And this also got him just a little bit more recognition. So, but the biggest thing that happened to him is that he submitted a single work of art for a group exhibit called The New Painting of Common Objects. And this was an exhibit in Pasadena, California. He was probably participating in a lot of things like this, but little did he know participating in this exhibit would be kind of life-changing for him, because this would end up being one of the first pop art exhibits. So pop art is just short for popular art, and this was just a huge art movement, modern art movement in the United States. And it was just a coincidental trend that a lot of artists in this era were sort of portraying moments of popular culture or mass culture, sometimes like movie stars or comic book images or advertisements, or even just kind of factory produced products. And that people would sort of exaggerate sort of the kitschy or sort of tacky quality of these subject matters. So Wayne Thiebaud at this time was doing lots of gumball machines, kind of slot machines, toys from carnivals and things like this. And it just kind of made, his colorful, fun paintings just kind of fit in with this sort of happy-go-lucky style of the pop art. So, and even though it doesn't maybe seem shocking to us at the time, the idea of doing these kind of ordinary objects that we see in everyday life was really unusual. It wasn't the sort of thing that you would see in traditional paintings, and it was a hit. It was an instant hit. So some of the other artists that were kind of famous for being part of the pop art movement were Andy Warhol, and a couple things I want to show you. Got a couple books that y'all can look through when you get back. I did a Andy Warhol puzzle during quarantine to entertain myself, but I've also got a giant container going that I'm going to try to paint like a Campbell's soup can, like Andy Warhol did. Another artist that was famous for the pop art movement was Roy Lichtenstein. He did kind of enlargements of images that already came from comic books. They were so big you could actually kind of see the dots that would have been kind of visible in a comic book print. And then another artist from that era was Jim Dine, and he was kind of known for these sort of fun painterly hearts. Now, even though Thiebaud's style kind of fit nicely into this trend, he had this colorful art, it was kind of simple, everyday objects, part of mass culture. It's important to understand that he was never really trying to be necessarily super innovative or be a member of any kind of trend. He sort of considers himself just this kind of humble, old-fashioned painter that just sort of got swept up in this mania. But it certainly, led to his artwork being very popular and selling widely. And then the last image of our slide is just a painting that he did. They premiered this on Wayne Thiebaud's birthday a number of years ago, and it was, Google's homepage. And like I said, he's 99 right now, but turning 100 this year, and he still paints, which is pretty cool. All right, thank you.